So it's been a couple days since the start of America's special military operation to demilitarize and denazify Venezuela, wherein American special forces went in and seized Maduro, who is now in the United States. America has announced that they've seized control of the country and they're going to run it, whatever that means. I don't think they actually have it any meaningful way, but that's another issue. And so all kinds of different reactions are filtering in. And this is what I find probably the most interesting about this, and it kind of underlines something I've noticed for a long time and occasionally mentioned. While there's no real term for people who collectively hold dissident international relations perspectives, that is, people who reject the post Cold War liberal internationalist slash neocon consensus, there's definitely a universe there. I guess for the sake of the video, I will call them IR dissidents or international relations dissidents. And these are the people who are, generally speaking, very critical of United States foreign policy, of Europe, of the collective West. And they'll go on each other's shows and they'll have similar takes and make similar predictions and have similar reactions. But when you really start to dig into it, a lot of these people have completely different foundational principles. And aside from disliking the neocons and the liberal internationalists, they really don't agree on anything. And you can really see that when things like the whole Venezuela operation happens. Now, there is largely a consensus that I've noticed that regardless of how you feel about it, the U.S. has continually screwed up these regime change, nation building exercises over the last couple decades. And that combined with the confusion and incompetence of the Trump administration when it comes to foreign affairs means that, once again, regardless of how you feel, this is probably going to be a disaster, and this was probably a bad idea. But aside from kind of the basic operational perspective, I find the responses interesting because it really shows how much diversity there is within kind of the dissident IR space. So maybe let's just go through some of the reactions. So you have people who are, I don't know if you want to say they're like America First, American nationalists, isolationists, basically people who do believe in America and sometimes even American hegemony, but feel that neocons are running the country into the ground, that they oppose the liberal internationalist order, they oppose the global American empire for a variety of reasons. This could range from they're conservatives and they don't like how social liberalism is being forced on traditional societies. They think a lot of this stuff is a waste of time and money. They don't want to go fight wars for the benefit of other countries like Israel. But at their core, they don't really endorse or care that much about the multipolar world order or international law or any of that stuff. But they don't inherently have an issue with the idea that the Americas or America's sphere of influence, the ideas of replacing leftist anti-American governments, even maybe the idea of using military force to ensure access to oil. It depends how nationalistic and how America-focused you want to go, but when you talk about these kind of people, they'll often say about the Iraq War, not that it was illegal, but we didn't actually get the oil, and it was done for the benefit of Israel rather than the benefit of the United States. They might well look back on a lot of the regime change operations and coups in Latin America during the Cold War, wherein leftist or communist governments were removed from power, and go, hey, that was cool. You have the Realists, who have kind of a different perspective. Obviously, there's some overlap here. But once again, they don't necessarily care about international law in and of itself. They might see it as a way to regularize the rules of the game between great powers. But they don't necessarily think it has any kind of independent, objective, moral superiority. And they might have been opposed to a lot of American foreign policy things like intervention in Ukraine. But oftentimes that was off of, well, realist logic, obviously. They might say, well, Ukraine's not in the is not an existential issue for the United States. It is to Russia. We have to accept that great powers have spheres of influence. That's clearly within Russia's sphere of influence, but they might say, well, Venezuela is within our sphere of influence, and it traditionally has been, and it is in America's interest to remain the hegemon of the Americas. Once again, most of them would probably be against this because it'll probably be a disaster, but they don't have the same kind of moral objection that some other people might. You have people who are more kind of conservative, who will actually care about stuff like international law, who will talk about the Constitution, who will be against this because Trump is overstepping his powers as president, that it's an imperial presidency, that this is violating America's agreements. It's kind of weird because these people will mock the rules-based international order, but then they like international law. I get that they're kind of different, but their perspective might be looking back on the founding fathers, looking back at international alliances and entanglements. So they might be pro-international law, at least in a limited sense, and kind of more American isolationist, even to the point of not wanting to maintain any kind of control over the sphere. And then you'll get into people who are third worldists. They're like post-colonialists or anti-imperialists or whatever. And attitudes range within this group between the desire for the third world to develop itself to just indigenous European hatred, the desire to destroy America and destroy Europe and destroy everybody who they believe has wronged them. And it's just basically hostility and revenge, or they want their countries to dominate the world and get their fair share, whatever it is. And a lot of these times, these people have very left-wing issues. So you'll have people who have like Catholic traditionalist or evangelical Protestant, like deeply socially conservative views, with people who are like third worldists and embrace every type of critical theory imaginable. And so when they talk about like this, they'll say, oh, well, this is the white supremacists in America repressing brown people. This is just because indigenous Europeans and their descendants are just inherently evil. As I think it was Ben Shapiro who said, white people have anti-Semitism in their DNA. That might have been someone else, but basically people who take that perspective. And I just always find it interesting because you'll have like Brian Berletic, you have the Duran, you have Daniel Davis, you have Mearsheimer, you have people like me, you have Nick Fuentes, and all these people will have similar policy positions or similar views as to what they would prefer America to do or rather not do. But the underlying worldview and the assumptions it's based on are so fundamentally different. It is interesting whenever things happen that show a divide in that regard. I know an omnipresent one is like the whole issue of the drug cartels in Mexico, wherein some of the more right-wing people are like, look, we need to do something at some point. These people are smuggling drugs into our country, human trafficking, all kinds of shady stuff. It might be in America's interest to not intervene, but maybe to offer military assistance to the Mexican government in order to try to get the issue under control. And there are some people who cheered when Trump declared cartels terrorists. I think it was narco-terrorists or whatever. And then there's other people who are like, no, this is racism. They're just poor businessmen. This was all America's fault. They're just trying to feed their families. It's just racism against brown people. Palestine might be the ultimate example of this because the anti-Israel coalition is this weird mixture of people on the further right and like nationalists and America First people and stuff like that, with people on like the far left who are anti-Israel. I mean, it depends on the country. In the United States, it's more the far left. In most other Western countries like Canada, it's the entirety of the left is anti-Israel. And so you'll get this weird scenario where you'll have people who are like literally describe themselves as like paleocons or neo-fascists or monarchists or whatever special snowflake title they want to use this week, who are going on with like leftist Muslims and finding common ground. It's all really weird, and you'll sometimes see people go like base to some like I said, American Muslim leftists. Just because they hate Israel so much, they're willing to ally with anyone, even people who are objectively destroying their civilization. So I just think kind of the fallout is interesting. Um, I think this was maybe also present during the Cold War, where you did kind of have, and maybe someone can correct me, I'm not super familiar. There were people who were anti communists and there were people who were neocons. So there were people who were anti communists who didn't really care about democracy. They just thought communism was evil and they wanted to prevent it from spreading and roll it back when possible. But the whole nation building democracy thing was not something they particularly cared about. It didn't matter if it was a democratic government, a absolute monarchy, a military junta, so long as it was not run by communists. Whereas you had people who were more about the whole democracy and freedom thing. Like, I think you could have supported the Vietnam War, at least the first phase of it, as a fight against communism, but not have been a neocon. Maybe you supported DM and thought that his one party state, even if it was very oppressive and authoritarian, was a much better alternative to communism, and you wanted to back him up from that standpoint. So I think there's been that tension, and I just kind of find it interesting, like I said, within the dissident IR circles, how people respond to events like this. Anyways, I hope you found that interesting. Just some thoughts I had. God bless, and I'll talk to you all again real soon.